My landlord was a terrible human being. Honestly, calling him a human is even pushing it. Just a few things he has done to me over the past 3 years. He stole my dryer and other household products that were in a common area, made me pay for a plumbing repair, which was deemed normal, wear and tear. Tried breaking into my house, retaliated against me because I went to my lawyer after he sent me a letter about a parking spot. He tried charging me an extra $150 a month. Mind you, I was never late for rent in 3 years, except for when he made me pay for the plumbing repair. So the next month, I was a couple days late. The list goes on. Now, this apartment was nowhere near nice. I found out the plumbing was illegal. He left me with a porch for years that had severe safety issues. The ceiling paint was always falling down. Gas heater was not up to code, and so on. I finally got my chance to leave after he wanted to raise my rent $500 a month. He will do anything and everything to get more money out of his tenants. So I called the building inspector 4 days before I left. I told him everything. The porch, when he finally replaced it, didn't have a permit and was definitely not up to code. I told him about the plumbing and the heater. I went on and on. The inspector came over the very next day. I saw him taking measurements. Each violation is a $500 a day fine until fixed. I honestly don't know what happened, but my God, did it feel good to finally get him back. He's at the very least on the town's radar. A week before I moved out, he tried telling me I needed to be out at a specific time. I never responded, and where I lived, that's not how it works. He tried to threaten me with the police if I wasn't gone. Well, I went to the police myself that morning to warn them. The landlord did come by, threaten me, and harass me. I called the police. They informed him I was in the right. Long story short, he had broken into my apartment. I had left to go to storage. While I was gone, he nailed my door shut. I told the police to get the supervisor because I was over being harassed by this guy. Go figure. He left before the supervisor could get there. I'm positive he knew he'd be arrested on site. Got the police report. They're charging him with a felony for breaking and entering. Fines plus a charge? Don't be a jerk to good people. I had a landlord who was pretty absent. I lived in this building, a high-rise, like 20 stories, for 10 plus years. He, despite living next door to me, was absent and cold personally, but cool enough. Rent was good. Our agreement was never bother him about anything unless it's an absolute emergency. Shower head wonky? Go buy a new one. Fridge breaks? Get it fixed or just buy a new one. Take it out of what you pay in rent. Lost the receipt? I don't care. I know more or less what a fridge costs. Just take it out of rent. Finally, his wife decides she wants more rent, wants to rent the place out as an office, which was not legal, and wants us out ASAP. I agree to move out a month early and get a month's rent back, plus deposit. Complete 180 on their part. He said, the place is ruined, can't give you shit until you fix all this stuff. 2. Main things, my cats did scratch up the leather legs of the dining table, and the pull-up bar made 2 dents in the door frame of the kitchen, which was quite nice hardwood. They come to me with this list of tons of stuff, like, oh, you hang a photo frame here. This tile is slightly chipped. This is the busiest work time of the year for me, but I'm trying to be cooperative. Sure. I got the table legs re-leathered, spackled the photo frame wall hole. Can't do anything about the door frame, take it out of the deposit, patch the tile. Like dozens of little everyday wear and tear things. Like you want me to change the window screens? These are all new screens and in nicer shape than when I moved in. But I did them all. I trusted the guy. Got to get my money. At the end, he should have been giving me 24K RMB, around 3,300. He gave me 5. I still need to use the money to fix all that stuff. If you can't accept the 5, I can't give you anything at all. I was super pissed off, but took the 5. Now, people in the building are gossipy. I don't participate, but I did tell this one older lady about my frustration. She told everyone. The wife went from being the star of the mommies group of the building to nobody wanting to talk to her. People shunned the guy too. I originally told them I was planning on moving to another city, but an opportunity came up and I ended up renting a similar unit in the same building. So they thought they could just screw me over and not have to see me. But now they still did. Often. A year later, the office calls me with some questions about how to do something with the floor heating. I go, door frame is not fixed and still has dents. I call the guy like, what the hell, man? And he tells me to mind my own business. 5 years later, I see the light at my old place is still on at 3 a.m. Huh, that's odd. I go to check. The door is open and the place is just trashed, ruined. Cabinets broken, writing on the walls that say, lazy landlord. And the dents on the kitchen door frame are still there. So the guy never fixed anything, just kept my money. By this time, smartphones were popular, and we had a chat group for the whole building with about 500 people. I took pictures and posted everything. Apparently, he had also nicked these people's deposits, and there was a huge ruckus when they trashed the place where the cops were called. All these people chime in with complaints and pictures. People smoking in the hallways, leaving leaky rubbish outside the front door, videos of people using foul language in front of children, dirty footprints. He got fined a lot, for one, creating a public disturbance; 2, degrading the quality of the living space; 3, illegally renting a residence as an office. And to top it off, the building management wouldn't grant him permission to have workers in to fix the place, so it sat there empty for like 6 months. The fines were big, too. Take around 1.5 months' rent from me, lose a year's rent. Suck it, bro. In the mid-2000s, my friends and I would frequent a small billiards place in a neighboring town where you could rent a table by the hour or play per game. We'd play a few games, watch whatever sports were on TV, and have casual conversations. There were no problems and no drama until about 3 months of us visiting this place. A guy shows up and takes our spot at the billiards table. No big deal. We were all chatting anyway. 20 minutes later, my friend lets him know we want to play next game, and the jerk is super dismissive. Needless to say, we didn't get in during the next game, so I politely let him know we wanted to play next. Another lady chimed in she wanted the game after us. The guy blatantly ignored me and the other woman. Some more time goes by and the guy leaves the table. We see our chance to get in, we put the quarters in, and the balls are dispensed, except the green 6 ball. The guy took it to the bathroom with him. At this point, it was ridiculous, and we notified the manager. The manager noted it was 12:30, and they were going to be calling last call and closing, so he didn't want to make a scene by kicking him out. He gets us another ball so we can play. The guy comes out of the bathroom and knows we realized what he did. He smirks and proceeds to the patio to have a cigarette, bringing along his beer and the green billiard ball. The guy comes back in and tossed the ball he was holding onto the table, hitting a few balls on the table and messing up our game. He goes up to the bar just in time for last call. One of the friends I was with suggested we follow him home and each call the highway patrol to report a suspected drunk driver. 3 of 4 of us agree. So, when he leaves, we used our trusty Nextel push-to-talk phones and coordinated several calls to the police. We provided details like license plate, vehicle make, and model, and color, and mentioned the car nearly hit another vehicle, was swerving between lines, and driving erratically. This was under a 15-minute plan. We had no idea where the guy lived, but suspected it was close, as he was visiting a neighborhood place, so our time was limited. The one guy who didn't notify the police tailed the jerk and called us giddy when a police officer pulled between him and the guy and turned in his lights to pull him over. The police blotter that week included an arrest of a guy who was pulled over after multiple calls of erratic driving. He wasn't arrested for DWI, but instead for driving on a suspended license. TLDR. Guy was a jerk at a local billiards club, so we got him pulled over by the cops, and he was arrested for driving with a suspended license. Landlords are assholes, generally speaking. Everyone knows that. But if you think residential landlords are bad, they're nothing compared to commercial landlords. Landlords of commercial buildings are some of the cruelest, nastiest people I've ever come across. This revenge tale is about a commercial landlord and how I dealt with him. Back in the 90s, sometimes I'd go for lunch at this restaurant in the basement of our building. The place was called The Vault because it had a massive bank vault that had always been there, dating back to the days before the place was turned into a restaurant. The vault was so huge that they could seat a couple of tables in there, and you could eat dinner surrounded by rows of old, gleaming, safe deposit boxes. One day I was there for lunch, and the owner took me aside. "The landlord's driving me nuts," he said. The landlord drives everyone nuts. I was a subtenant in the same building, sharing space with an older lawyer, Aaron, and the landlord was always causing us trouble. I'd already had a few run-ins with him, and we hated each other on site. In most jurisdictions, commercial landlords don't need court orders to get you out if you're late with the rent. Instead, they just change the locks, and you find out about it when you show up and your key doesn't work. Every time our landlord had a dispute with anyone, which was often, he'd always threaten to change the locks. He keeps demanding all this stuff for extra rent, and it's really weird because a lot of it's really old. The restaurant owner showed me a letter the landlord had served on him earlier that day. I looked over the demand and read a list of expenses for snow removal and parking lot repair and common area flooring and all kinds of crap going back years. I read it all the way to the end, and there it was, the usual clause saying he was going to change the locks if the tenant didn't pay this and do that. From the wording of the demand, it looks like you've been fighting a while. Why did you wait before consulting a lawyer? I asked one of the lawyers I know, and he said it's hopeless. He told me the lawyer's name. It was a guy I knew with a shitty real estate practice who'd resorted to taking little legal aid cases to keep the lights on when the market tanked in '89. You do something to make the landlord hate you? I asked. Because this is a bit over the top, even for our asshole landlord. He knows I'm moving the restaurant. I think he's trying to grab as much money as possible before I go. Plus, he's giving me grief over the vault. He won't let you take it with you? Are you kidding? It weighs almost 100 tons, and I don't need it. But the lease says I have to remove it, and that I also have to restore the building to what it was before there was a vault. That would cost a fortune. The asshole landlord says if I leave the vault behind when I move, he'll sue. Send your lease up to my office and let me look it over, I said. I finished my lunch, and when I got back to my office, the lease was waiting for me. It was just as bad as the restaurant owner said. The lease was a renewal of an assignment of a renewal. The original documents dating back to shortly after World War II, when a bank first leased the place and the vault was installed. Somehow the landlord had suckered the restaurant into taking over a lease that left him liable to remove a bank vault at the end of the term. No big deal, I thought. The restaurant can default, and all the landlord can do is sue a shell company. But when I got to the last page of the lease, there was a guarantee clause. The restaurant owner had personally guaranteed the lease, and he was on the hook for removing a vault weighing 100 tons and then fixing the place up. It would cost a fortune. The case was hopeless, of course. That was obvious right away. But then I thought about the asshole landlord, with his demands and his threats and his rent hikes, and I asked my brain to do me a solid, which it promptly did. I picked up the phone and called the restaurant owner. I'm fucked, right? You're calling me to say there's no way out. That's what my commercial lawyer already said, but I just thought I'd ask. I can save you, but it's going to cost. How much? $5,000 in legals and another G note for the agent. Agent? What kind of agent? Real estate. Send up a check, certified, and leave the rest to me. The check hit my desk in less than an hour. I went to Aaron's office. I need a real estate agent, I said. You buying a house? Nope. Selling a house? Nope. By this point, I'd been sharing space with Aaron for almost 5 years, and he knew me pretty well. You pulling one of your stunts again? He asked. Yup, but nothing that will get you into trouble. I know a guy. Aaron knew all kinds of guys, and that's one of the reasons he eventually got disbarred. But he knew a guy, and he gave me the agent's name and number, and the next day, I paid the agent a visit. I told him what I needed, and we agreed to terms. I gave him some papers and the cash for his fee. A few days later, I was again at the vault for lunch. The owner saw me walk in and greeted me himself. The landlord's here, he said. Why? For lunch, and to be an asshole. Let's sit in the vault room so I don't have to look at his face. He took me to the vault room, and with the door almost completely closed, we had a consultation while we ate pasta and drank red wine. We're making demand on the landlord, I said, munching on spaghetti carbonara. Demand? What are we demanding? I pulled a document out of my briefcase and passed it to him while I sipped my wine. We're demanding that the asshole landlord release all the restaurant equipment, all the fixtures, the ovens, the freezers, the ventilation, everything you need to run a restaurant. The lease exempts all that stuff. He can't stop me from taking what I want. The only thing that matters is the vault. And, of course, I don't want that. I shook my head. You need the vault, I said, and we're demanding that he release the bank vault as well. We're insisting that he let you take it out within 7 business days. You think you can beat the landlord with reverse psychology? You think if you treat him like a 2-year-old, you can manipulate him into doing what you want? We'll find out soon enough. He's had the demand for a couple of days now. The restaurant owner dropped his wine glass, and it shattered on the marble floor. You already gave it to him? The restaurant owner said. He got up, swung open the vault door, and called for the waiter to clean up the mess. Let's see what the landlord has to say, I told him, and we walked over to the landlord's table. The landlord was a big, beefy man with a big appetite. He sat alone, eating a rack of lamb wolfishly with his hands. My client needs an answer today, I said. The landlord looked up at me as he chewed noisily. I'm the vault's lawyer, I said. I gave you a demand the other day. My client needs an answer right now. He needs the vault for a new place, and he's got to make arrangements. Your client can forget about the bank vault, he said, wiping his massive, greasy hands on an already soiled napkin. But you can't do that, I said. My shock was feigned, but the restaurant owner's jaw dropped for real. The landlord laughed at us. I'm the landlord. I can do what I want. I'm going to need that in writing, because my client might sue, I said. Sue all you like, the landlord told me. Sue till you're blue in the face. He told me that I'd have a formal response by day's end. And then he told me to go away and let him finish his lunch. When the letter arrived from the landlord, claiming ownership over the bank vault, I brought it downstairs and showed it to my client. How the hell did you do that? Trade secret, I said. The following month, the restaurant moved out, and the place was empty, and that was too bad because I had always liked eating at the vault. Now the restaurant was in a new location 20 minutes away. They called the new place The Vault, and they'd preserved the vibe of the old place. It was very similar, except they didn't have the bank vault. The bank vault, all 100 tons of it, was where it had always been, in the basement of the building where I rented space. I showed up for work a little after that, and Aaron collared me. The landlord's looking for you, he said. Oh yeah? What about? He's really angry. He said his deal fell through. Deal? He was supposed to rent the place downstairs to a new tenant, a bank or a credit union or something like that. They were supposed to come in to sign a lease, but they didn't show up. And what's that got to do with me? I said to Aaron, and I said the same thing again to the landlord when he managed to track me down a couple of days later. I know you were behind this, he said, his jowls quivering. I know it was you. That offer from the agent, it was all bullshit. Just a trick to make me keep the vault so that your client could sneak out of the place and leave that fucking bank vault behind. I'm gonna sue. If you're looking for counsel, I think I'm going to have to declare a conflict. I'm going to sue the restaurant and that agent, and I'm going to sue you. He stormed off. But the landlord didn't sue. Of course he didn't. He didn't have a contract to sue on, only a vague letter of intent that I'd drafted, enough to hook a greedy landlord who was used to having his way. The offer he'd received was non-binding, incapable of acceptance, without the signing of a formal lease, which of course never got signed. When I left Aaron's place a year later, the downstairs was still unoccupied, with a sad "for rent" sign sitting in the window, starting to look faded. So, my dad owns a house that he's been renting for some time now. The tenants that lived there were for the most part decent people who my dad thought were trustworthy. That all changed about 2 months into the tenancy when the tenant refused to pay the month's rent. My dad showed some leniency and gave them another month to pay up what was owed. They didn't pay a thing. By this point, my dad, frustrated by the whole situation, and being 2 months out of rent, money offered them a deal. Leave the house ASAP, and then only pay half the money owed, they countered, with a different agreement. They would leave the house in a clean state with all of their furniture left behind as compensation. My dad, wanting to just be done with them, agreed. Cue to when my dad gets to the house, finding the place in a mess, with none of the furniture left behind, including the furniture that belonged to my dad in the first place. The 2 sofas that my dad owned were left behind, but they were trashed and left in the shed. When my dad confronted them asking for them to pay up the full amount that the furniture was worth, he was met with a promise of payment after 2 weeks, which he didn't believe. And when he requested they pay earlier, he was met with, "Good luck getting your money," followed by laughing emojis. This made my dad angry, and he decided that he wasn't going to let this slide. My dad knew that the tenant was a Christian pastor of a church, and his son also had some job related to the church. My dad contacted the church and explained everything from how they hadn't paid him rent money to stealing the furniture and trashing the place. The church was somewhat interested about this behavior. The next day, my dad gets an angry phone call from the tenant's son, cursing at him and asking him what he thought he was doing contacting the church, saying he was being unfair. My dad hung up on him only for him to attempt to ring 10 times after he hung up. From what we could piece together, the church had told the pastor that if he didn't settle things with my dad, him and his son would lose their jobs. My dad received the full amount for the furniture that same day and agreed to back off. My dad later said, "It was never about the money, but the way this guy treated him and his values." My dad, being a Christian himself, was disappointed. That's all the stories we have today. If you genuinely liked the stories, take a second to like the video. If you want more Reddit stories, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and until next time.